Ferrari promised a revolutionary car in 2025, but the SF25 is turning into a disaster. How is it possible that, with Hamilton and Leclerc at the wheel, they're falling so far behind? In this video, we'll analyze what's wrong with the SF25, the reasons behind its poor performance, and whether there's any hope for Ferrari this season. Before we start, tell me in the comments, can Ferrari recover, or will this be another season to forget? The Ferrari SF25 was presented as a revolutionary single-seater, designed to return the Italian team to the title fight. However, the start to the 2025 season has been disappointing, with performance far below expectations. Frustration is evident both within the team and among the fans, who had hoped to see Ferrari competing on equal terms with Red Bull and McLaren. From the first race of the year, the SF25's problems were evident. At the Australian Grand Prix, the gap in pace with the leaders was alarming. Charles Leclerc finished 36 seconds behind Lando Norris, 19 seconds behind Max Verstappen, and 6 seconds behind George Russell after just 27 laps. These numbers reflect not only a lack of competitiveness in terms of pure speed, but also deficiencies in car management during the race. The car has shown problems in several key areas. One of the most worrying is the inconsistency in performance depending on the track conditions. Throughout the weekend in Australia, Ferrari struggled to find the right setup. During qualifying, it became clear that the SF25 was having balance issues, resulting in uneven tire wear and a lack of grip in medium and high-speed corners. The team also faced difficulties in race management. Pit strategies were questioned after late pit calls compromised drivers' positions. A lack of immediate response to changes in the race, such as the incidents involving Liam Lawson and Gabriel Bortolito, affected the final result. Frederic Vasseur acknowledged that the team had failed to maximize the car's potential and that they needed to thoroughly analyze the mistakes made. Another worrying aspect is the performance gap between Ferrari and its direct rivals. McLaren, which won the Constructors' Championship in 2024, has shown great progress with a car that performs well on different types of circuits. Red Bull, despite a less dominant start to the season than in previous years, remains ahead in terms of consistency. Mercedes, which was a step behind in 2024, has shown signs of recovery and threatens to become another direct rival for Ferrari. Despite the poor start, the season is still in its early stages. Ferrari needs to accurately identify the SF25's weaknesses and find solutions before the gap with McLaren and Red Bull becomes irreparable. The team faces a key challenge, balancing efforts between improving the current car and developing the single-seater for the new 2026 regulations. The upcoming race will be crucial to determine whether the problems seen in Australia were an anomaly or represent structural flaws in the SF25 concept. The SF25 has brought with it one of the most radical technical modifications in Ferrari's recent history, the adoption of a pull-rod front suspension. This change has generated intense debate within the paddock, as it represents a departure from the pushrod setup the team used in previous years. Suspension is a crucial element in Formula One, directly influencing car stability, airflow management, and interaction with the tires. The pull-rod system is not new to the series, but its implementation requires precise knowledge of how it affects the car's aerodynamics and mechanical behavior. Teams such as Red Bull have mastered the development of this setup, achieving advantages in aerodynamic efficiency and center of gravity. Ferrari, however, has decided to make this change at a critical time, with only one season remaining before the introduction of the new regulations in 2026. The SF25's main problem with this suspension lies in the complexity of its setup. In the first race of the year, the car struggled to find the right balance between stability in fast corners and response in slow corners. The lack of adequate front-end stiffness has led to understeer issues, forcing drivers to compensate with handling adjustments, sacrificing performance. One of the critical aspects of the pull-rod suspension is its impact on airflow management under the car. In theory, this design optimizes aerodynamics by reducing the drag generated by the suspension components. However, if the correlation between simulation data and actual on-track performance is not accurate, the result can be an unstable and difficult to control car in various race conditions. In the case of the SF25, data from the Australian Grand Prix suggests that the new suspension could be contributing to uneven tire wear. During the race, Leclerc and Hamilton experienced a loss of performance during extended stints, suggesting that the downforce generated by the chassis is not being distributed optimally. Developing the pull-rod suspension requires a fine-tuning process that typically takes several seasons. Ferrari has opted to make this change with little time to perfect its performance. The decision to implement this concept in the final year of the current regulations could become a difficult risk to justify if the team does not find solutions quickly. A comparison with its direct rivals paints a worrying picture. McLaren and Red Bull have maintained more advanced and refined suspension setups, ensuring their cars are consistent across different types of circuits. Meanwhile, Mercedes has taken a more conservative approach, focusing on improving the correlation between simulations and actual on-track performance. The challenge for Ferrari in the upcoming races will be to efficiently integrate the pull rod suspension into the car's aerodynamic package. If the team fails to stabilize the SF25's performance on circuits with varied characteristics, the suspension change could end up being one of the most costly decisions in recent years. The performance of the Ferrari SF25 in the first race of the season has left a big question mark. Is this an isolated problem, or does the car have structural difficulties that will be repeated at other circuits? At the Australian Grand Prix, it was clear that the car wasn't handling the conditions of the Albert Park track. But the big question is whether this is a sign of deeper problems that will manifest themselves throughout the championship. Every circuit presents unique challenges, and a successful Formula One car must be able to adapt to different types of track. Ferrari appears to have developed the SF25 with an aggressive focus on aerodynamics, suggesting the team was confident the new concept would allow it to compete with Red Bull and McLaren on most tracks. However, the reality has been different. Lack of balance in medium and high-speed corners, inconsistent traction out of slow corners, and excessive tire wear have called into question the car's versatility. The Albert Park circuit, where the first Grand Prix of the year was held, is a semi-urban track with a low abrasion surface and demanding braking zones. In qualifying, Ferrari already showed problems generating optimal tire temperatures, which affected its performance over one lap. In the race, compound degradation was higher than expected, forcing drivers to modify their pace to try to manage wear. One of the most worrying aspects is that these characteristics are not unique to Albert Park. There are several circuits on the calendar with similar demands in terms of traction and stability, such as Montreal, Singapore, and Monaco. If the SF25 struggles on these types of tracks, Ferrari could lose significant ground in the fight for the Constructors' Championship. Another factor to consider is the correlation between the data obtained in the wind tunnel and the car's actual performance on track. If the team developed the SF25 based on simulations that do not accurately reflect race conditions, the problems may persist until significant modifications are made to the car's setup or aerodynamics. The contrast with McLaren and Red Bull is evident. Both teams have developed cars that perform consistently on different track types. McLaren, for example, has improved the efficiency of its aerodynamic package without compromising traction or stability in fast corners. Red Bull, meanwhile, continues to maintain a design optimized for high downforce circuits and long straights. For Ferrari, the challenge will be to understand whether the problems in Australia were specific to that circuit or if they are a trend that could affect its performance throughout the season. In the upcoming races, the team will need to find quick responses to prevent the SF25 from becoming a car overly dependent on favorable conditions and instead be able to deliver competitive performance in a variety of scenarios. The 2025 season has gotten off to a difficult start for Ferrari, but it is still too early to determine whether the SF25 will be an outright failure or if the team will be able to react in time to turn things around. Formula One history has shown that, on many occasions, a team that struggles early in the season can find technical and strategic solutions that help it regain ground in the championship. One of the factors working in Ferrari's favor is the car's continuous development throughout the year. The team is already working on a series of updates to try to address the issues identified in the first races. Improvements are expected to include modifications to the front wing, adjustments to the front pull rod suspension, and optimization of the aerodynamic flow under the car. These areas have been identified as some of the SF25's weaknesses, so any progress in these areas could make a significant difference to the car's performance. Ferrari's technical department is also analyzing data obtained from simulations and wind tunnel tests to determine if there is a discrepancy with actual on-track behavior. In the past, teams such as Mercedes have experienced similar problems when theoretical models did not match race results. If Ferrari can identify and correct these errors in data correlation, it will be able to adjust the car's setup more effectively for future races. Another key aspect is race strategy management. At the Australian Grand Prix, Ferrari missed valuable opportunities due to late pit decisions and difficulties adapting its tactics to the circumstances of the race. Better coordination between engineers and drivers could allow the team to minimize the car's disadvantages and make the most of the strengths that have not yet been fully exploited. The driver's role will also be crucial in the recovery process. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc have the experience and talent to provide detailed feedback on areas that need improvement. Hamilton, in particular, has been in similar situations before, when Mercedes struggled to develop its car at certain points during its dominance in the hybrid era. His ability to work with engineers and find technical solutions could be a decisive factor in the evolution of the SF25. The question Ferrari needs to answer as soon as possible is whether its current problems are simply setup issues or whether there are structural flaws in the car's concept. If the team can find solutions quickly, there is still room to compete at the top of the grid. However, if the improvements don't produce the expected results in the upcoming races, Ferrari could be forced to completely rethink its approach and, in the worst-case scenario, begin diverting resources toward developing the 2026 car instead of continuing to try to improve the SF25. The Formula One calendar offers several opportunities for Ferrari to show if it can bounce back. Circuits such as Imola, Barcelona, and Silverstone will test the team's ability to adapt to different track types. If the SF25's performance improves at these races, Ferrari can stay in the fight. Otherwise, the 2025 season could become another missed opportunity for the Italian team. The 2025 season began with high expectations for Ferrari, but the early results have raised concerns both within and outside the team. The SF25, designed with a radical approach to compete with Red Bull and McLaren, has shown more problems than expected, and now the big question is whether Ferrari will be able to react in time or if this will be another season marked by frustration. The assessment after the first race suggests that Ferrari has a car with potential, but with significant weaknesses that require urgent solutions. The gap with McLaren and Red Bull, evident in Australia, is not insurmountable, but if the team doesn't find answers in the upcoming races, the title fight could be out of reach. The problem lies not only in the technical concept of the car, but also in the correlation between theoretical data and on-track performance, race management, and the SF25's adaptation to different types of circuits. In terms of development, Ferrari faces a strategic dilemma. It must decide how much effort to invest in improving the SF25 versus the need to prepare for the new 2026 regulations. Aggressive development could allow it to make up ground in the short term, but if the underlying problems are too profound, insisting on improving this car could compromise its competitiveness in the future. The role of the drivers will be decisive in the road to recovery. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc have the experience and talent to provide key feedback to the engineers. The pressure on them will also increase, especially if Ferrari fails to find rapid improvements and internal strife begins to generate tensions within the team. Another key factor will be the response of Ferrari's technical department. If they manage to find effective solutions and implement them before the gap with the leading teams becomes too large, the SF25 could still become a competitive car in the second half of the championship. However, if the upcoming updates don't deliver the expected results, the season could be lost before reaching the European stage of the calendar. The upcoming races will define Ferrari's direction in 2025. If the team manages to improve its performance and find greater stability in the car's behavior, it could remain in the fight for podiums and victories. If the problems persist and the gap to the leaders widens, the team's attention could begin to shift toward preparing for the next era of Formula One. Ferrari's fate this season is still undecided, but the window of opportunity to turn things around is closing rapidly. The decisions made in the coming weeks could determine whether this year will be remembered as a step forward in its recovery process or as another frustrating chapter in its fight to return to the top of Formula One.